Oh no, Brian Von Vier here, back at it again with another set of what was the most stupidest, dumbest, horriblest reason someone rage quit your D&D group, part 2. I love these stories, so if you have one to contribute, please put it in the comments below. Not D&D, but once upon a time I was playing Chronicles of Darkness with a group at my girlfriend's uni society. The problem player had just joined the game the session prior and had decided to be a part of the Shadowrun Corporation, a group of monster hunters that dissected monsters to turn them into medicinals. Well, the ST decided that to link him to the party, he was going to be assigned as a bodyguard to one of the other characters, as she'd been getting stalked by someone. So the party captures this stalker, and Mr. Vivisector decides that we need to interrogate him, heading off to one of his group's facilities soon after. While there, the character he'd been assigned to protect gets curious and wanders the restricted halls, finding a barely alive man chained to a bed with silver handcuffs. Ooh, kind of fun. She, being ever so sympathetic, decides to try to pick the lock on them. While she fails, the demon that attached itself to me decides to say, "Hey boss, watch this," and the handcuffs click off. Mr. Vivisector walks in at this point to see a werewolf transforming and tries the old, "Well, my regular carpentry hammer is made of silver, so I do big damage to it." When I told that, 1, that wasn't on his sheet, and 2, he wasn't a big enough factor in this organization to have been given that kind of resource or responsibility, he started to sulk a little bit. The session ended with the werewolf transforming and barreling through the both of them, knocking them aside like they were nothing. I had gone and hidden in a room out of the way because a demon saying, "Hey, watch this," is always bad news. The resulting lunacy from witnessing it transform left them gibbering fools. We never saw him at the table again, though the ST overheard him talking shit about the game the following week, and for a long time felt bad about it, thinking he'd done something wrong, even though he planned on making it a slow burn payoff. He had intended to basically give him an arc of his own of retrieving the werewolf. But good news, we later met the werewolf and his pack and got to know them so much that the character that thought she freed him ended up dating one of the other pack. We even took on the big bad evil guy together. I didn't really see this as a rage, and I don't really see this as a big problem, though the guy in question just wanted to do something kind of handy and nifty, and when he didn't get a chance to do it, he was just like, "Oh, well, this kind of sucks." So, I don't know. This can go either way. This was in a Pathfinder 2nd Edition game. So I was playing in a game with a few other buddies, and the DM was pretty inexperienced. We all decided to play martial classes so we could go around being bullies, and it would be a pretty simple formula for the DM. We started with 2 barbarians and later wanted to add a monk. The monk's player was known to be difficult, but this really took everything to a whole new level. The new player was playing a dwarf and was being chased, running from his life from a giant cyclops. Myself and the other barbarian tripped the cyclops to the ground and kill it in a single round, rolling at least 1 crit. Unfortunately for the monk, he rolled low in the initiative order and just didn't get to make a turn before we killed the cyclops. Our characters then approached the monk to greet him, and the player said that the dwarf simply ignored us, walking between the 2 of us into the woods where he had come from, and never came back. He had decided, with no prompt or collaboration from the DM, that it was his mission for his people to kill this cyclops, and because the 2 barbarians had done it, he had failed, and wanted nothing to do with the group. This character never spoke a word, he was simply described and then left. We don't even hang out with this guy in real life anymore. Once again, I don't see this being terribly all that rageful, just more like a, god damn it moment, but at the same time, kind of a bad way to just kind of leave the group. Always give it a chance. Had a GM rage quit once, which was interesting. He was the organizer of Big Games Club, which had loads of different activities: Magic the Gathering, Warhammer 40k, board games, card games, and tabletop RPGs. He seemed like a pretty decent guy, and when I joined the club, he was setting up a D&D campaign and I was offered a place. The problem was that, despite claiming to have GM'd before, he had no clue about the rules, and no real plan of what he wanted to have happen in the campaign. The first session went quite well, with everybody making characters, but things rapidly went downhill over the next couple of weeks. The party had no real direction, so just aimlessly wandered around the village, which the GM explained we were all visiting. The GM was doing nothing to help the situation, just getting cross or angry at people for not taking things seriously. In our 3rd session, the party found out that a woman from the village had gone missing, and we set out to find her. Dun dun dun! It turned out she was an evil witch who was summoning undead wolves to kill all of the villagers. That's actually pretty badass. It was pretty obvious that the combat encounter hadn't really been scaled to the party, and we ended up with a nearly complete TPK. It also became clear at this point that only myself and one other player had any clue about how the D20 system actually worked. The GM was furious at the players for not finding the clues that the witch was in the village, blamed a couple of people for ruining the game, and then stormed out of the club. Textbook rage. And from a GM who was completely inexperienced and literally had all the blame on them. So my group was playing a simplified version of D&D over Zoom during the pandemic. We all took turns DMing. It was a very casual thing. We were using a town another player created as our base. He stated that he was happy that we were all using his town in our adventures, and I was DMing. Long story short, they return after defeating the villain to find some of the villain's minions attack the village. I say that in my description that a few generic townsfolk were killed, but all the important NPCs were unharmed. This is when the other player flipped out and decided to randomly pull out a magic item that gave him a wish. Well, I didn't let that slide because he never had that item in the first place. Then he leaves the session. Afterwards, he texts me saying that he doesn't care what happens to the village. He wouldn't be coming back. That's kind of sad in a way because you had a great village, you had something really cool, and it was amazing, and you let one little thing ruin it. Sorry, buddy, but you won't be missed. We had just brought in a new player, and I was trying to set the scene for them. Our other player was late to join in, but I was in the middle of something with the new player. Instead of saying anything and making himself known, he left a call and was like, "If you don't want me in here, just say that my character died or something." This honestly made me very upset. Too upset to continue that session, and I had to end it just 10 minutes in. Everything is fine now. The other player didn't permanently leave the campaign, and everything is okay now. Honestly, I don't understand here. If the character or player is not going to interact with the party, why are they there? I never rage quit myself, more so just left on okay terms after saying I had other stuff to do, or ghosting in the case of my one major horror story of a table. However, I heard and witnessed several rage quits at the horror table. It was Pathfinder 1st Edition. I love Pathfinder so much. The first was my first ever game that wasn't just newbies. Brothers Who Rage Quit. It sounds like a movie title. The Brothers Who Rage Quit. At the time, I thought they were just being immature since it was about the results of a D10,000 roll for a wild magic ale. They got angry about it for a few times, and I later learned it was because they specifically asked the DM to not include this magic ale in private before the game started. He brought it in anyways, using it in every game he runs, especially with new players who don't realize what it does, myself included. Another left mid-session because, in the next game, the same magic item was used and made all dwarves, including this player, look like Oompa Loompas. There were also a couple of others from that table alone, but in hindsight, it was always leading back to the DM either ignoring player wishes, giving out punishments randomly for no reason, aka a cleric of a goddess of mercy who also hates necromancy losing their powers after killing an evil necromancer, or giving no punishments until the crimes are so terrible it completely removes a character from the game. A druid who committed terroristic acts in a major city for weeks, including a few murders and a collapsing building, and only getting punished after all of it by being sent to the 9 hells, rather than being punished for earlier stuff like leaving piles in people's grills and shoving a town guard into a sewer. Yeah, DMs like this, they can really ruin or make or break a campaign or even a group of people. Sorry that you had to go through that. It was Shadowrun, and technically the guy from my group rage quit the entire server. Our GM runs multiple games throughout the week and asked if some folks wanted to play a team of antagonists for an arena-type mission in another game. Some folks, including our support mage, signed up. Now, in Shadowrun, rather than hitting a DC, sometimes enemies make an opposed skill check. Think making an acrobatics check instead of a dex save in D&D. I'm not sure if it was something our GM did or if it's actually in the SR rulebook, but it's important to note that it's been well established by this point that our GM rules that the players wins ties when they come up. And this is why our mage's rage quitting was so stupid. During the game, this guy had rolled to grapple another player and the two rolled a tie. Since he was effectively a one-shot NPC in someone else's long-running game, the GM ruled that he lost. The next round, the player he tried to grapple cast a spell to stun or paralyze or something so they could run away. Again, the two roll a tie, but this time the caster's spell is successful. This dude flips off the handle, ranting and raving about favoritism and bad GMing before rage quitting the session and leaving the server entirely. Again, he was playing an NPC in someone else's game, and players win ties was by no means a new or obscure rule. Our GM says players win ties literally every time it comes up. So much so that even if it's a group skill check, he'll say it on reflex anytime he sees two matching numbers. Our players even tried, calmly and confusingly I might add, pointing this out while he was going on, but to no avail. For some reason, he wasn't having any of it and left the server entirely. The worst part is that this was my team's support mage. I was combat spec mage, and the only other caster on our crew. Took me months of effectively doing nothing but the bare basic support before the party was able to level up enough to compensate for the loss of our primary healer. And I never leveled up enough to be able to deal with the spirits properly before I had to leave the game for IRL stuff, so those were a nightmare when they popped up. Ugh, not a good time. I pointed out shield stopped a magic missile. Okay. When he started complaining about something that had been in the game way longer than 5th edition, which he claimed to be well versed in, blah blah blah, I offhandedly say, counterspell. He left the server and didn't return for several sessions. When he did, he eventually got to a point of deliberately sabotaging that game and a few others after. Unfortunately, he didn't reveal he'd done it on purpose until after I introduced him to another friend to play in their game. Guess what? He sabotaged that as well. Players like this, why do you even bother playing games? What, just to ruin other people's fun? Go home. Touch some grass. The party approached a shallow river, and my character had brought a horse and wagon. One player wanted to lead the horse across and then drag the wagon across himself. Another, whose character was specifically proficient in wagons, offered to drive it across. The rest of the party, including owner of said wagon, voted to let the second one drive it across. The first one got mad and re-explained why his plan was better. Well, of course, the party understood his plan, but wanted to go with the second one. First player gets angry and starts shouting his plan, including insults at the other players for not wanting to go with his plan. Eventually, by the fourth round of, "We understand your plan, we just don't agree with it," and him screaming insults at the player who volunteered to drive the wagon, host had to take him aside. He rage quit the game, and the player he had been screaming at said, "I don't come to these to get screamed at," and also quit. Hey everybody, Brian Von VA checking in after the vid. Please make sure to leave a like, subscribe, ring that bell, and of course leave a comment down below talking about the stupidest reason somebody rage quit a session of your D&D game or otherwise. And that said, toodaloo.